Okay, this is the sit rep for Tuesday, 08 March 2022, day 13 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The last sit rep I did was day 8. I have not done any since then because there has been very little changing of the front lines reportedly. The map I'm showing you right now is the one I had from day 8. Here's one I could find for day 13. Not much changes, and I can tell you every single news network, every single organization out there has a different map showing where the front lines are supposed to be at. The reason I chose this one is because there's conflicting information that the push north of Sumy is just short of Kiev now. That's why I got this map. But if you remember from a few days ago, we're supposed to have pretty much this entire area of eastern Ukraine is supposed to be linked up here. And more area up here is supposed to be occupied by the Russians than what they're showing on this map. No real advancements in the south. Okay, information that I am able to get. Kharkov. Reportedly, a counterattack was launched out of Kharkov on Saturday. The Ukrainians are reporting large numbers of vehicles and equipment was captured. And this equipment is now being used by Ukrainian forces against the Russians. Down in Crimea, not a lot of info down there. The only report I have is on the humanitarian route out of Mariupol. There was reports that when the civilians tried to leave, they were fired on. It's said to be by Russian forces, but no one knows for certain. They also reportedly, the civilian vehicles were coming across landmines on the humanitarian corridor out of Mariupol, and everyone's screaming it was the Russians. I have my questions on that because Mariupol is the area of operations for the Azov Battalion and a few other neo-Nazi and Nazi-related units. Is it possible they mined the roads to blame on the Russians? It's possible. A lot of information out of Ukraine is so questionable, you don't know what's real, what isn't. The amount of propaganda is just ridiculous. For those of you that question neo-Nazis being involved with the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian government in Ukraine, I will post in a comment, it will be pinned, a 6-part mini documentary about what we are not being told. Watch all 6 parts, okay? Most people are only watching the first part and then they come out and they say, oh, this is Russian propaganda, I can't watch this. Once you get down into parts 3 to 5, that's when they actually start getting into showing you who's actually involved in the fight, showing you in their own words who they are and their own actions. All right? Watch all 6 parts. Oh, in Kharkov, I do have a number here for the number of troops that are being committed by the Russian army to this assault alone. They are tracking 23 battalion battle groups down there, tactical battle groups, with numbers of around 4,600 infantry, 230 tanks, and 1,000 armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles are committed around Kharkov alone. Kiev. We're seeing a lot of activity up right around there right now. It's thought that the front lines are still approximately 14 to 15 miles out from Kiev proper. Recon elements do advance closer, but main body is still thought to be 14 to 15 miles out. It is looking like the Anatov airfield at Hostomel is most likely being set up as a forward operating base, where that's probably the final destination for the supply trucks in the 40-mile convoy out of Belarus is heading to. The convoy is still stationary, and we are now getting information as to why. Reportedly, there is heavy militia activity against the 40-mile convoy. They are attacking the convoy in multiple locations, changing where they attack the convoy also. So you get a little bit of movement, and then the movement stopped because one unit gets attacked at a choke point. Well, that damaged equipment has to be moved out of the roadway before the convoy can continue. I seen multiple reports on that where they're not saying it's militia. You know, one report said, well, it's the Ukrainian resistance, because they refuse to say the M word. And another report that still says, well, it's Ukrainian forces. There is sightings inside this 40-mile convoy of BMP-3s and T-90 tanks and what look to be BTR-90s. So they are shifting some of that higher-end, newer equipment into the north now, sending it down to build up for the assault on Kiev. The Russians have been sighted. This is being reported from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. They have been sighted at setting up supply depots and hospitals to the north and the west of Kiev for the push on the capital. 3 main forward operating bases are being identified. One at Bordanka, another at Katsuka, and another one at Gavrash. There's also been a sighting of a helicopter forward area refueling point at Ivankiv. We have a report of additional reinforcements are inside the convoy for the assault on Kiev, so this is on top of what's already committed in that area. Inside the 40-mile convoy, they've identified what they believe to be 3,600 infantry, 180 additional tanks, and 400 additional infantry fighting vehicles. Thought to be around 18 battalion tactical groups are being moved in to reinforce for the assault on Kiev. Okay, casualties, what's being reported so far. The United Nations is tracking 4,006 civilian KIA, 801 wounded, and they're reporting as of today, day 13, around 2 million refugees. I do got to point out though that these are just estimates on the refugee numbers, because it's not like there's someone at the border with a counter clicking off every time a civilian passes them. So those numbers could be exaggerated. They could also be considerably lower than what's actually out there. Now, battle damage assessment. I finally have one. These numbers are from Monday the 7th. Ukrainian military is reporting that they have killed 11,000 Russian soldiers so far. U.S. Pentagon is saying it's probably around 4,000. Ukraine is also reporting that they've shot down or destroyed or damaged 46 jets or fixed-wing aircraft, 68 helicopters. They've destroyed or heavily damaged 290 tanks, 1,000 armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles, 23 surface-to-air missile and air defense artillery systems, 50 multiple launch rocket systems, 450 supply trucks, 60 fuel trucks, 117 artillery pieces towed and self-propelled, shot down 7 drones, and have damaged 3 patrol boats and light ships down in the Black Sea. Numbers that can be confirmed according to videos and pictures out of Ukraine show only 851 Russian vehicles destroyed. Ukraine. The United Nations is estimating around 13,000 KIA killed in action for their troops. We have confirmed numbers of approximately 248 pieces of equipment destroyed, according to footage from the battlefield. Reports are 8 fixed-wing aircraft, nothing currently on helicopters, 46 tanks destroyed, of which 44 are T-64s and the other 2 are T-80s. 89 APCs and infantry fighting vehicles. 10 surface-to-air missiles and ADA systems. 2 MLRS systems. 87 trucks. 21 pieces of artillery, of which 14 are towed, 7 self-propelled. 1 drone. And 2 ships destroyed, with one of them being scuttled by the crew. The other one actually lost in combat. There is a note here, Russian casualties. They suffered. Another general has died on the battlefield up around Kharkov. This is from intercepted communications from Russian forces being sent back to Moscow, a report that was intercepted over the weekend. This is reported by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. The general is identified as Major General Vitaly Gerasimov, the deputy commander of the 41st Combined Arms Army, was killed up around Kharkov along with multiple officers over the weekend. So this is probably linked to that counterattack on Saturday. The Russian army is not confirming this death yet. Okay, some things up here for the Russian army. Putin announced over the weekend that any nation that attempts to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine will be seen as an active participant in the combat, and it will be considered a threat to Russia and dealt accordingly. Meaning any jets that go in from NATO or any other country to enforce a new fly zone will be shot down by Russian aircraft, or attempted to be. There is indications that the Russian forces are suffering massive maintenance issues. From the footage that's being seen and reports from the battlefield that's coming across on social media, they're finding a lot of Russian vehicles that the tires have burst on them, so there's indications of dry rot. It's not just that they have cheap Chinese tires. It looks like they did not maintain the vehicles in storage in those forward areas along the border. They weren't taking care of them, so they're dealing with dry rotted tires, dry rotted seals, blown engines. That might be part of why so many vehicles are getting left behind. Now, there's also a major OPSEC thing here. And I was first made aware of this because of watching some reports from Terrence Popp redonkulous. And I did find a article about this through the New York Post, I believe it was. I linked to it over at Patreon over the weekend. Russian soldiers in Ukraine are getting bored and getting horny. They are getting on Tinder and trying to pick up the beautiful Ukrainian women. These soldiers are dumb enough to give away details about their units and unit locations. These girls that are getting these messages on Tinder, most of them erase the information, but some of them are passing this information on to the Ukrainian army, which is passing it on to troops in that area to locate these units, and then these Russian soldiers who were trying to get laid end up getting laid out on the ground with a bullet through them. So keep it in your pants, people. That's a little OPSEC lesson for you. Tinder is not your friend on the battlefield. Reportedly, because of this, when the Russian army figured out what was going on, they told their soldiers to turn off their phones and potentially have them taken away by the leadership. Okay, Ukraine. We got here, first off, it is now confirmed that Ukraine received and is currently employing around 36 Turkish Bayraktar TB2 UAVs, mostly for reconnaissance. Only a few strikes have been attempted with these. Thoughts are the Ukrainians do not have the ordnance to put on these UAVs to use them against the Russians. When they have used them against the Russians, it's primarily been against their air defense systems and also a few fuel trucks to see if they could set them off. My question is, why is Russia not shooting them down? Because reports are only 1 or 2 Ukrainian UAVs have been shot down. These systems, the TB2s, are so slow and so loud, you should be able to identify them quickly and easily. They're not stealth aircraft. They could easily be shot out of the sky with a 2S6 Tunguska or a ZSU 23-4 if they even have some of those old ass things on the battlefields. You don't need to waste an SA-16 on it. Hell, you could probably take them out of the sky using a 12.7 millimeter mounted on top of a tank. So why are the Russians not shooting them down? Apparently these things are droning back and forth above the Russian troops almost all day long, and no one is taking shots at them. We have a report of a human rights violation here, a violation of the international laws of war by Ukraine. How many of you are aware that these videos of Russian prisoners that are being put out by the Ukrainian military are actually in violation of international laws of war? This is abuse of prisoners. The Ukrainians are actually having some of these captured Russian soldiers use their cell phones and call their mothers back in Russia to try to get them so riled up that they call the government to plead with them to end the war. Propaganda videos like this are against international law. We have some humanitarian stuff here. The Red Cross and other more reliable charities are having problems getting supplies into Ukraine. They can't find truck drivers willing to cross the border into Ukraine with the supplies to get them to the people that are in the shelters in Kiev, Kharkov, Mariupol, Sumy, and other locations. So there are reports that the Red Cross and these other charities are building up massive stockpiles of supplies right at the Ukrainian border. They're trying to get the stuff across. No one wants to drive the stuff in there. And they are, the Red Cross at least, and a few others I came across today, like Knights of Columbus, are setting up refugee centers on the border. They're starting to pass out supplies there. There are reports that some international medical organizations are also going and setting up clinics and field hospitals can't talk, on the border for the refugees. Now, stuff for NATO, and it's all related to the United States. The U.S. is urging all Americans to return from overseas, especially those that are in Russia. They put this announcement out after reports came out of a American WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association or whatever, player was arrested in Moscow apparently in late February. Well, the dumb bitch had cannabis products on her. The U.S. government is saying that they doubt that. They think she was arrested just because she's American. Who knows for certain? But if she was dumb enough to try to sneak out drugs with her, she's a moron, and she's facing up to 10 years in prison. Okay, Biden officially today, Tuesday the 8th, has banned the importation of Russian oil into the United States. Putin immediately after banned exports out of Russia to the West and most other countries. There's a few countries that are exempt, like China. Items that are banned from export include oil products, all fertilizer-related products, iron, copper, aluminum, nickel, grains. Basically, we just seen between a quarter to 50% of the world's supply on many materials just disappear. According to Putin's order, the stuff is not to leave the country's borders until after December 31st of this year. At that point, they will reconsider allowing stuff to go back on the international markets. So, what does that mean? Well, that means you can expect what you're going to be paying for a gallon of gas to go up by $1 to $2 by Friday of this week. And I'll throw this out there. I would not put it past that the national average for a gallon of gas by Memorial Day of this year, by May, will be around $8 a gallon. And if you live in California, I really would expect you're going to be paying over $10 a gallon by Memorial Day. That's if we do not get another source for oil or gas, and it's not going to come from the United States. Reportedly, they are working on trying to get oil from Iran, Venezuela, and more from Saudi Arabia. What could go wrong there? Okay, and a report just came out before I started this video. Should point out the current time is 2200 hours Eastern right now. Poland has now agreed to turn over aircraft to the United States for sending into Ukraine. This aircraft includes primarily old MiG-29s. Poland wants them replaced with F-16s. These F-16s will be drawn from units in Germany. Now, there is a fight going on as to how these aircraft will end up into Ukraine, because it's really spotty on this, because Russia has said if anyone supplies aircraft to Ukraine, they will be considered being involved in the fighting also. So it kind of sounds like what's going to happen is Poland is going to transfer the MiGs to U.S. air bases in Germany, where they'll be gone over, repainted, whatever's supposed to happen there. And then somehow they're magically going to disappear from Germany and then reappear on Ukrainian bases. I don't want to go into too many specifics on this because it's kind of up in the air. It's thought that the stuff might be brought in through a neutral country that is neither part of NATO or officially allied with Russia, but is willing to help out Ukraine. That maybe that will kind of lighten the strikes against them, so to speak, where maybe all they'll have to deal with is some type of trade restrictions. Other countries that are currently being pressured by the U.S. government, the U.S. State Department right now include Bulgaria and Romania. This U.S. State Department is trying to get them to transfer MiG-29, Sukhoi 25s, and Sukhoi 27s. Thoughts are that those other countries also will have those aircraft replaced with F-16s and likely A-10 Warthogs, which are being retired by the U.S. Air Force right now. But it will take a few months to train the pilots in those countries to be able to fly U.S. aircraft. So there's going to be a gap for their air defenses and ground support for those countries for a little while. And I guess that's part of the whole deal. They got to figure out how to not lower their defenses on the possibly eve of World War III. Propaganda news, it's basically everything you're seeing out there. It's ridiculous now. There was the report over the weekend, I think it was Friday, that the Russian Duma, the Russian Congress, banned people from posting social media posts that were negative about the Russian military and Russian operation in Ukraine. So the US media was talking about censorship, this is Soviet, so on and so forth, screaming about that. But they don't talk about that Western companies, Western countries have banned news reports coming out of Russia from Russian news agencies. You can't even access Russian government sites, websites to get information. I've tried accessing the Russian Ministry of Defense to try to get a look at some of their reports for casualties and that stuff. You can't do it. There was also reports last week, before Russia did this, of Europe, people that are posting things in social media that's not considered supportive enough of Ukraine, or potentially those posts are supportive of Russia or Putin. They're getting knocks on the door from the local police, hauled out and sent to prison for their social media posts. So guess what? Both sides are cracking down on information contrary to the narrative they want out there. It's not just the Russians. So you got that big piece of propaganda going on. You also got the continued push, because there's not a lot of moves on the battlefield. You got the constant tug at the heartstrings about the numbers of children that are killed, the numbers of children that are in the refugees, how many women there are that are in the refugees. I saw reports over the last 2-3 days here where they're talking about, oh, hospitals are getting emptied out, and talking about how hard it is for the people leaving and fleeing these hospitals, trying to get your emotions going on that also. It's really thick. I can't confirm this. No one can confirm this, but reportedly there is some information out there that it looks like the Ukrainian government might be paying its citizens, or some of its citizens, to produce propaganda pieces. That they're paying their citizens to basically set fire to buildings and then make it look like those buildings were hit during shelling or some type of attack. And just some weird stuff. This cannot be confirmed by anybody, but with the amount of propaganda coming out from both sides on this war, it's possible, it's true, but none of us can say for certain. I've heard this said by a lot of veterans. It's even appeared in my comments on the SITREP videos, and I agree. There is no clear good guy in this situation. There is no clear bad guy in the situation with the war in Ukraine. But it's clear that both sides in this war could be considered to be the bad guy. As I said before, I've said it in the past, and I'm going to keep saying it. I do not support Putin and the oligarchs that control Russia. I do not support Zelensky and the oligarchs, their neo-Nazi buddies that run Ukraine. I don't support either side. I support the troops on the battlefields, the ones that are getting sent out to die in this bullshit. I especially support the people that are fighting on the front lines and behind the front lines, trying to push an invader out of their country. And I also support the civilians that are having to go through all this. They're having to endure this, whether they want to or not. I do not support the politicians on either side of this war, and I don't support them here in the West either. Remember, it wasn't that long ago here, where here in the United States at least, we were talking about bribes coming out of Ukraine, out of China, out of Russia, going to certain politicians in the U.S. government. Did people forget that? Did people forget a certain president or his son and his laptop and his emails, about 10% going to the big guy? Did people forget that? And now all of a sudden, the big guy wants us to get involved to save the country where this money was coming out of. Does anyone notice a conflict of interest here? And I guarantee it's not going to be any of his sons or grandkids that would be going off to die on the battlefields in Ukraine or in the skies above. This war is a shit show all the way around. Let the Ukrainians slug it out with the Russians. As I said before, I have no problem with us sending weapons to them. I really don't. I even approve of us somehow slipping them aircraft. And you know why? Because the Russians fucking did it over the years with us. The Soviet Union sent MiGs, Yaks, Sukhois to the North Koreans in the 1950s during the war. They sent stuff to the North Vietnamese during the war in the 60s and 70s. And let's not forget about those AKs that appeared in every damn conflict around the world where the United States was involved in. Oh, and did we also forget about, in Iraq, GPS jammers, which was the latest equipment on the market at the time, arriving on the battlefields of Iraq in the hands of insurgents? And this stuff was so fucking new, it still had Russian army markings on it, for God's sakes. Did we forget about that stuff? So are you understanding now that I really don't have a problem with us sending weapons in? I don't support the government's going to. I support the troops on the battlefield that are trying to defend themselves. And they're trying to defend themselves with old-ass Soviet shit. Let's give them a little bit newer shit so they can defend themselves a little bit better. Reportedly, the stuff we're sending is doing really damn good. There is no reason for us to send in troops, for us to send in pilots, for us to send in sailors, for us to send in Marines to back them up. The Ukrainians are doing just fine on the battlefield. The Russians have not pushed through. Anyone can guess as to the reason for that, and quite frankly, we're not going to find out the reasons on this stuff till the war is over. Everyone's gone back to their start points, and the analysts start combing the battlefield to get every bit of data they can possibly get for what type of ordnance knocked out every specific vehicle, every specific location, how that ordnance was delivered, and by whom. It's going to take a few years to get that info. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.